Good evening, everyone, and welcome to an Oz Cyclone Chasers update today, the 14th of April 2014. And after 1,800 kilometres worth of driving, our epic adventure is over for Tropical Cyclone Ita. And a big welcome to our new fans. It's been a great adventure. We've seen and met some amazing people along the way, and I'm sure and I'm hoping that we've taken you along for the ride as much as we could have. Obviously, in the remote areas of far northern Queensland, internet coverage is quite patchy, and so we've tried to do our best to bring you as much of the action as possible and as much of the information as possible. Before we start tonight's update, there are a few businesses that we really do need to mention, and we'll mention these businesses again on our social media as well. River of Gold Motel took us in at some very late notice. At that stage, we were planning on going either to Port Douglas or Cooktown. We were looking to go to Cape Flattery, but there was obviously nowhere we could safely stay. So Cooktown or Port Douglas were the two options, and the River of Gold Motel at very late notice allowed us to stay at their motel. Also, that allowed the SES to stay at their motel, and they fed and housed. Their hospitality was amazing over some very trying conditions. So the River of Gold Motel, folks, big thank you to the people there that looked after us, and also the SES volunteers. The North Queensland Chocolate Company helped sustain us by giving us a lot of healthy, nutritious bars, as well as some very tasty chocolate bars for the duration of this chase. Their chocolate bars are very energy dense, but they're made out of real stuff, and so they help sustain us for a very large period of our chase and helped keep us reasonably healthy. I mean, we do tend to eat a lot of junk food when we're away on trips like this, and this has helped limit the amount of junk food we ate. So Yaddo there at the North Queensland Chocolate Company gave us about 3 boxes of different bars, or sorry, 4 boxes of different chocolate bars and things. Some really tasty stuff in there. So check them out on the web too, northqueenslandchocolate.com. On our way back, we were stranded outside of Mount Malloy for a night, and fortunately, we were able to contact Mount Carbine Caravan Park, and once again, at very late notice, they were able to put us up for the night, and some very good rates and some really nice parkland that this is located on Mount Carbine, just to the north of Mount Malloy, on the road to Cooktown. So a big thank you to those people who housed us there. They were very, and they even cooked us breakfast, which was just bloody amazing. So it's fantastic to see. Thank you very much to the owners and proprietors of Mount Carbine Caravan Park. And one of the funnest nights I think the Oz Cyclone Chaser crew has ever had was found on the Mount Carbine Hotel Motel. It's amazing. Sometimes when you think, oh, you're stranded, you just have the most amazing time, and that was one of those things. Last night, the Mount Carbine Hotel Motel went off. Other travellers also stranded, just like us, and we made the most of a big night. And the publican here, Dale, was extremely courteous, hospitable, and it's just a great pub, folks. So if you do go past this area, have a go. They've got great food and great drinks. And look, it's not just the people that I've mentioned today that have helped us. We've had so many offers for assistance, so many offers for just help and donations and all sorts of things like that. And it's just completely humbling, folks. So thank you very much. It's beyond expression. We can't express how we're thankful. And I know I might sound tired today, but really I will try and get over the next 24 hours, try and get in touch with all those people who have offered support and offered help, just to express our real gratitude for that. Thank you very much, folks. Without your help and support, we couldn't do what we do, and we wouldn't be as successful at doing it as we are. So thank you very much. All right, let's get into tonight's update. Tropical Cyclone Ita weakened overnight as it pushed a little further to the east-southeast or southeast away from the Queensland coastline. However, it didn't so much weaken as it transitioned to an extratropical cyclone. So it was downgraded to a low, but in fact its actual effects have been upgraded. You can see here that it has a destructive wind boundary now, not just a gale radius. So thankfully it's made this extratropical transition. So by what I mean there is it's not getting its energy now from the water, it's actually getting its energy from the difference in temperature from the lower to upper atmosphere. And so it's now become what we call extratropical, and we see that the system is pushing southeast further away, and it's going to present a significant threat to the North Island of New Zealand in a couple of days. And so we do hope that folks there are taking precautions for this system. There is a chance that it will merge with another low pushing across the Tasman Sea, and they may form into one large, very, very intense and rain-producing extratropical low. Alright, so that's the end of Ida's life cycle, but it was quite an adventure. Similar to many other cyclones this season, Ita, 14 days since the initial low was formed and the cyclone was downgraded to an ex-tropical cyclone. You can see here it became very intense as it approached the far north Queensland coast. It weakened, and the reason for its weakening was due to an eyewall replacement cycle before landfall. And then once it did make landfall, it weakened because of two reasons. It weakened because it was a very small system, and because it didn't have any feeder bands or real feeder bands into the system. And so therefore, once it hit the topography of the land, which is option 2 or reason 2, it weakened fairly quickly into a Category 1 cyclone. In fact, there was pretty little evidence of a Category 1 cyclone damage between sort of the Cairns northwards region. However, once we got south of Cairns on our trip southwards, we could definitely tell it was Category 1 type damage. As it tracked towards Townsville and then Bowen, and then off the Whitsundays, it started to push in a more southeast direction away from Queensland, and as I say, it's now been downgraded. So if we have a look at some of the rainfall associated with ex-cyclone Ita. Thursday was the first sign of some rain from this system, and we had most of the rain up around the Cooktown area and around Cairns. Now, as we headed to Friday, we saw that rain became much heavier as the system made landfall here around the Cooktown, Cape Flattery area, and also pushing south towards Port Douglas. We saw some big rainfall totals here, 200 to 300 millimetres in many parts. I even saw some pretty decent rain pushing inland. We also started to see the development of some rainfall to the Herbert and Libertican coastline and further south on the North Tropical Coast. We also had a bit of a feeder band or a convergence band along the Whitsundays coastline as well on the Friday. On the Saturday, that heavy rain left the Cooktown area and went south towards the Cairns to Bowen area, and we see some really heavy falls in the Ingham district, Cardwell district of 300 to 400 millimetres over 24 hours. We see some pretty decent rain also over inland parts as well, and we also see some pretty decent rainfall developing along the central Queensland coast there, but really the heavy stuff located anywhere from about Ayr through to about Cairns. Now, as we headed to Monday, so this is the rainfall from Sunday to Monday, we can see that anywhere north of Townsville saw a big clearance. There were some lingering showers and storms here on the tablelands, but overall most of the rain activity now fell a lot further to the south on the central coast, the Capricornia coast, to a lesser extent the southeast Queensland coast as well. Some very isolated fall here of over 200 millimetres off the west of the Sunshine Coast, I believe, as well. But overall, we see that even though the rain did start to push more southwards, the heavier totals were no longer being experienced as the cyclone lost some of its identity and started to push a little bit more offshore. So while it was here, it was right on shore and was creating some massive rainfall in the North Tropical Coast and Herbert Libertican region. And it still created some pretty big falls in the Central Coast Whitsundays, but not the sort of level of falls that we saw the first 2 days. So overall, this system has created some really big falls throughout Queensland, so 300 to 400 millimetres, more than 400 millimetres in parts of the North Tropical Coast, and even seeing those falls extend inland a fair way into the northern inland parts of Queensland. However, they didn't really extend inland through the rest of Queensland, so the rest of Queensland has only seen very, very small falls, and even Western Queensland has seen nothing from it, so that's disappointing for them. But you can see overall 100 millimetres plus over much of the coastline in the central, north and far north, with parts of the coastline seeing extreme falls. Alright folks, that's where we're going to leave Ida, and we're going to talk about a new tropical low formation potential. In the longer term, the GFS forms two areas of interest here, one in the far northeast Coral Sea around the Solomon Islands again, and another one around the Northern Territory coastline. Now, it's interesting to note which one of these two might decide to develop into something more significant. At this stage, model guidance suggests both of these will remain just weak tropical lows or tropical disturbances, with neither showing signs of real development. But there are different signs on different model guidance that suggest, particularly the Northern Territory one, may have a chance at firing up a little more than expected. So you can see as we head to the extreme long term here, as we head towards next Tuesday, we have that area of disturbance here in the Solomon Islands remaining in the area. That's not good news for the Solomon Islands, folks. They've had some places have had over a metre of rainfall there in the last few weeks. So there is not good news if there's a new development happening out here. Forget about the impact possible on Queensland in the extreme term, but just the impact on the Solomons themselves. Yeah, it's not going to be great news for these guys, folks, if there's going to be another tropical disturbance in the area. So we're hoping that this one isn't the one to fire up, and this one is more likely to be the one to fire up. But at this stage, it's a pretty even split between guidance as to the Northern Territory one becoming a little bit more significant, or the Solomons. You can see GFS wants to develop both. That's unlikely. One of them is likely to take precedence. Both with this one here, we're looking at the potential for some fairly large rainfall totals over the Northern Territory, the far northeastern top end, if it comes to pass. Looking at the CMC longer term forecast, you can see this area of enhanced convection right along the Northern Territory coastline, right in this area here. Or just in the Arafura Sea, for instance. You can see there enhanced convection. None of that spinning up into a cyclone or a low, but it is something we'll need to watch in the long term. With the European ensemble, it's a bit of a no-brainer, really. The European ensemble is only interested in the Arafura Sea here in the 5-day time frame. It's also interested, though, in another possible tropical low or cyclone located out here in the far southern Indian Ocean. But that still could be located in the Australian region of responsibility. So we could actually see Tropical Cyclone Jack form before being a tropical cyclone east of 90 degrees east. This could become an Australian cyclone, a WA cyclone, I should say. Alright, so this is day 5 on the Saturday. This is what we're expecting. By day 7, we see that the cyclone out here, or the low out here, could be a cyclone by day 7, which is the Monday. We see this area continued of instability being progged by some of the Euro members here in the Arafura Sea, right near the top end coast. And by day 9, I know we're looking a long way ahead, but overall the Euro ensemble is suggesting that that low in the Arafura Sea or off the top end coastline will start to drift a little bit to the west towards the northwestern top end. If that happens, we might see an increase in shower storm activity along the far northwestern coastline. And or we might see the potential for cyclogenesis to increase in the system as we head into the extreme forecast period, which is mid to late next week. Now we see this Indian Ocean system is likely to have been caught by an upper trough and sheared away, but the remnants may create some activity for southwestern WA in the long term as well. But overall, this is the area we're watching with some semblance of something happening here in the Solomon Islands by some of the guidance, but most of the guidance is keen on this NT weak low developing. At this stage, not looking at it forming into a cyclone just yet, but we are watching it closely. And also don't forget the chance that Tropical Cyclone Jack might form out here in the far western part of the Australian area of responsibility. So I guess what we can take out of that, folks, is that the season is definitely not over just yet. The MJO lies into the Coral Sea at the moment, and that's to be expected. We saw a cyclone develop over Australia. Remember, when the MJO is in phase 4, 5, and 6, we see cyclone activity potential increasing in Australia, and that's exactly what we've seen with Tropical Cyclone Ida. Now, from here, the models expect that the MJO will die completely over the next 3 to 4 days. It'll be dead, and then it'll just sort of linger in the region, but be that weak that it won't impact our weather systems at all. So I guess, folks, the cyclone potential will decrease as a whole due to the general circulation of the tropical atmosphere, but be aware that the model guidance is picking up on that area of enhanced activity just to the north of the Northern Territory, and as soon as we get that in the surface level at least, there is just that chance of something forming. Sea surface temperatures over the Northern Territory are well and truly warm enough to sustain anything and everything up to a Category 5. So sea surface temperatures are not going to be the issue here with the new tropical low. So it's just a matter of, can we get something to actually enhance its development? Can we get enough moisture into the system to develop it? Because by now the Northern Territory, at least most of the Northern Territory, is starting to get into more of a dry season pattern outside of the coastal fringe. So if that dry air penetrates into where the low is trying to form, that low will not be able to do so. However, if the drier air, the drier southeasterlies coming through the Northern Territory don't push as far northwards as the low-level circulation centre, then I guess it does have a chance of developing. So looking at the rainfall potential tomorrow, we see some rain returning to the Cape York Peninsula here, mostly in the western parts of the Cape York Peninsula, and also just some very isolated showers and storm activity right along the northern and northwestern top end coastline. Some very isolated shower and storm activity possible over the southern inland Queensland as well. Ita, or ex-Ita, is now really ramping up in intensity as she pushes southeast towards New Zealand. No effects on the Queensland coast from her tomorrow. On Wednesday, we continue to see some enhanced shower and storm activity over the Western Cape, possibly some showers developing along the Eastern Cape north of about Ingham, and also some of that isolated shower activity pushing inland in the northern inland parts of Queensland as well. So once again, some very isolated shower activity over the northwestern top end, possibly even a storm in that, but overall mostly shower activity. Thursday, we see that area of enhancement of weather pushing westwards in the northwestern Gulf of Carpentaria. Now, that's associated with the low. Remember, we're watching a low there about to form over the next 3 to 5 days. We're watching the system then pushing very, very slowly westward. So we could see an increase in rainfall here over the northeastern parts of the top end coastline. So around the Gove, Elcho Island, all the way through to Groot Island, and so we see that potential there increasing. We also see a decrease in shower activity as most of that rain activity now pushes westwards towards the NT, a decrease in shower activity over the West Peninsula because of that rain activity moving to the west towards NT. Also some isolated showers along the Queensland coast. As we head to Friday, we see the top end coastline coming under the influence of that weak tropical low, possibly at least weak tropical low. If not a weak tropical low, there's going to be a convergence area here which is going to create this fairly heavy rainfall right along the coastline, and also possibly still remaining on the eastern top end as well, or the eastern NT coast as well. Over the Queensland region, fairly fine. WA, completely fine as we head over the next 4 days completely. So we've got too much dry air going now through WA, so that should be the end of their particular wet season. As such, we don't expect a increase in rainfall there unless it's associated with this low over the NT as it pushes west and possibly forms into a cyclone. We don't expect a return to wet season conditions in the northern parts of WA. Alright, so the next 4 days, nothing much happening outside of the stuff I mentioned. On the 4 days after that, though, we do start to see that increase in rainfall over the northern top end, particularly the Arafura Sea. We're not quite sure at the moment whether this is going to impact the Northern Territory mainland or whether it's going to be something for the extreme north and into the Arafura Sea region. So that's not quite clear yet on model guidance. Also remembering that some models do have some activity in the Coral Sea and the Solomon Islands. If that activity does develop and remains very weak, it will push very slowly to the west, and that's why you see an increase in rainfall out here in the central and northern Coral Sea region. If it develops with any strength, so if it forms into a low or cyclone out here near the Solomons, it's not likely to push towards Queensland. It's likely to push more towards the south and then southeast away from the Queensland coastline. So folks, at this stage we don't expect it to form into a cyclone. So if it does remain a weak trough or a very, very weak surface low, it is likely to push to the west. Alright, thanks for watching tonight, folks. Our next update will be, what's tonight? Tonight is Monday, so our next update will be Tuesday, and then we'll go to 2 updates a week again. So Tuesday and Friday is our normal updates during a non-active period. So this is counted as a non-active period because there are no cyclones threatening the Australian mainland. Alright folks, thanks for watching, and once again, thank you to everyone who has helped us over the last 5 days on our chase, and we'll talk again tomorrow night. Good night.